Hi, this is Shira Rubinoff. Welcome to Insights in Tech. I'm here with Paul de Graaff. Paul, welcome.
Thank you.
Paul, can you please introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them a little bit about your career and what you've done.
Sure, no problem. Kind of. So I've been in security for about 30 years, all because of a movie called War Games, kind of back in the day, and been basically in engineering and managerial positions. Had the pleasure of being the global CISO for AIG during the financial crisis,
Wow.
but that is a story in itself.
We'll have to do another interview on that.
We can indeed.
Excellent. So we've seen the world just ebb and flow through the whole corona pandemic and how businesses have taken a hit in many different ways and the movement to remote work and how to manage people's organization, employees, security, just across the board. What have you seen thus far in terms of organizations struggle maybe to maintain their level of cybersecurity and security within the organizations?
Yeah, I think there's a few things we can talk about. There is the organizational side, which is purely, how do you manage people in a remote kind of workforce?
Yeah.
I think people that were global companies and had the benefit of a diverse workforce had some benefit to that because they were used to using people in, remote locations and having the benefit of how to stimulate that. Kind of people that may have not had that experience will be challenged. I sometimes call it if you were doing management by attendance, then those people will definitely have some problems. On the security side, I think a lot of companies struggle to give access to resources, right? Kind of, I mean, not everybody may have had a laptop or things to take home with them so that they could access corporate resources. So those companies may have struggled with that to give people access to the right resources and may have permit personal devices all of a sudden to have access to resources. So that in itself probably opened up a whole new world of attack vectors, kind of.
Certainly. And during this time, we've certainly seen the rise in cyber attacks and ransomware and malware and all sorts of things that organizations don't want to go anywhere near, certainly targeted at employees through phishing or other types of ways that they trick individuals through the human factors. Have you heard about any of this going on within, obviously not your company, but across the different spectrums of talking to people within industry?
Yeah, definitely, kind of. I mean, especially with, as I mentioned, the personal device side of things, where people don't have the protections that they normally have from a corporate perspective. So, what I've seen a lot from my peers and even ourselves at the time was scaling out. VDI is sort of making a comeback, kind of, if you will, having these virtual devices that people can access from their personal devices, but basically restricting, the capabilities that people normally would have on their personal devices and securing their environment that way. So, we've used Amazon Workspaces very effectively to that. And, there are probably other solutions that people use to all of a sudden give their people workforce access to these things.
Well, right now we're actually straddling the next phase of business openings in terms of partial remote work, more in-person work. Organizations, some of them have set down protocol, you're not coming back to work for the foreseeable future. Others are making it up to the choice of employees. And then there's a mix of the two. Some people have to be at work because they're just needed. It just can't continue this way for some organizations. And they can work partially at home. What kind of tips can you give organizations and or employees as they're starting to make way into the next phase of reopening businesses?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that probably is going to happen as people make their way back into the offices is just the whole collaboration efforts are going to change, right?
Yeah.
People are not sitting next to each other anymore to discuss problems or whatever. So problem solving will be probably one of the biggest challenges, kind of, for organizations on how that used to work, and now people may have to do that somewhat virtually or half virtually, if you will, with some people in the office, some people at home, and having more of a rotation schedule probably of their employees, I can foresee. So that is a big one. I think that will do, but also whether will we bring people back or will we operate in a fully remote workforce, right? I think, especially given the cost pressures that organizations have, I can foresee that, real estate, especially like if you're in New York City, like I was, then, the cost of real estate is expensive. So all of a sudden there's opportunities to say, do we really need this full building or all these floors, and having a workforce related to that. So I think there will be opportunities both from a cost perspective, where people are definitely looking at, and then for the people themselves, I think, yeah, it will be a bit of a personal choice initially. Kind of, I personally would be weary going back into New York City, kind of, if you will, if I had to. So that's definitely something that I would personally consider. So I think organizations will have to give that a little bit of a consideration, whether you can really push people back to work, if you will.
Sure. You touched upon an interesting point of collaboration. Would you find, or have you found, that that works more of a generational piece? We find that millennials are used to working remotely. They like working remotely. They, again, I'm not talking about all millennials. I don't want any hate mail. But in general, communication is text. Communication, we text, we social media, we share, and we share online, and that's cool. And then our social life is more in person. And we find that, Gen X can be both, a little bit of both, but they still like the in person. And when you get to the boomers, it's more of, we need to meet each other. Let's have this social piece. And we found also, as the generations advance, that these pieces of social interaction are almost failing the younger generations because of so much interconnectivity through devices. So are you seeing, or have you heard or found that any organizations are struggling more with different generations across the organization when it comes to collaboration, as you mentioned?
Interesting. I think you're just telling me that I'm old now, kind of.
No, 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 no.
I have that
I'm
problem.
considering you a millennial. I'm talking about us millennials here.
That's all right. I was just joking. No, I think there's different ways to collaborate. So I think a lot of new tools are available, and we definitely saw some hesitance around these tools, kind of, to collaborate. But I think a lot of, as I was mentioning earlier, a lot of the global corporations were probably used to that collaboration already, especially if you had an international team. I was fortunate to have an international team.
Yep.
So having to work with Europe and different time zones, you can meet people. Yeah, you may bring people over once or twice a year for a group meeting or staff meeting or so, but in an international world, you just can't do that. So I think with newer tools like Slack and Microsoft Teams and those kind of collaborative tools, I think it has really opened up a new way to communicate with people and actually collaborate far more easier. I mean, I've definitely seen, like, maybe that is a bit of an age thing. We still communicated very much in an email kind of format, the older folks maybe. But I know a lot of youngsters never touch emails. If I send anything from email to a younger person, I was usually not going to get a response. But if I send a Slack message, they were on it like 2 seconds, right? So there is a bit of a change on how people work, definitely from an age perspective, than say the older generation. But I think with the right education, I think that's one of the things probably that people have underestimated, is the education of the workforce that need to be working in a more digital and collaborative environment. Is probably something that needs attention.
Yes, I very much agree. And let's move on to the future of work. As we've seen, due to the pandemic, things are moving a lot quicker in terms of the advancement of some technologies, whether it being security or cybersecurity, maybe, a few years ahead of what would have been had this pandemic not hit. Do you see any of that? Have you seen or had discussions around where we are headed over the next 2 to 3 years, certainly in the security space?
So I think some technologies will make a resurgence. One of them is sort of what I call, or what was called in the industry, user behavior analytics. So the whole use of ML and AI kind of to analyze people's behavior,
Sure.
especially in the remote workforce now, where sort of that may have been a specialized area that you used to focus on, kind of now becomes sort of the norm for the whole workforce, and really see these trends on how people are accessing data, people are downloading data maybe, or other operations that they perform, just to see how that behavior is, kind of. So I think you will see a resurgence of those technologies, probably augmented with ML AI and integrating into more of a security operations team that's going to get very busy on these kind of behaviors, but more looking at trends, not necessarily at each individual event because that is not feasible. But I definitely think that trend reporting and seeing how people are using systems will become more and more important for organizations, especially when the workforce may be 50% remote.
That makes a lot of sense. And any final tips you want to leave our audience with, maybe around security or personal security within their environments or organizations themselves in terms of tightening up their cybersecurity posture?
Well, I mean, this may be a little bit of a soapbox. My last couple of years, I spent very actively in identity and access management, and I think if people haven't already, identity and access management is sort of the foundation of any security program, kind of. So you see a lot of companies that are operating in that space have done very well in the last couple of months in COVID, where people really understood the need for more what I call risk-based authentication. So now coming with different devices from different locations and still determining that it's you that is logging in, kind of, if you will. So those technologies will definitely continue to see success, but also just understanding who's accessing what and what are people getting access to is a key foundation. So I think if organizations haven't got their act together, that will become more and more, the foundation of security programs.
Of course, it's all about the data, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for sharing your wise words with our audience. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me, and good luck with your next sessions.
Thank you.